All right, so welcome to the final capstone presentation for the Green Program, August 2023. We have some really exciting projects up and coming that are going to be presented here today. And for anyone listening or watching at home, I'll just give a brief introduction about what the Green Program is. So it's an experiential learning opportunity for students or professionals or anyone interested in sustainability to come to Iceland and learn hands-on about renewable energy. And also do a lot of really cool things like camping in the highlands, hiking to hot rivers, and all these sorts of things. But in between all of the fun, all of the students and professionals and sustainability enthusiasts here have been working on a capstone project. So over the past 8 days, in any spare time I've given them, they've put in all the work to come up with some really cool solutions for sustainability facing real world problems that we have here today. So how this is going to work, pretty simple. The presentations are 15 minutes long with 5 to 10 minutes of questions. When you guys are presenting, I'll give you a warning at 5 minutes, at 3 minutes, and at 1 minute. And then when your 15 is over, you're over. So, and then we'll just have 5 to 10 minutes of questions from you in the audience or anyone who wants to ask questions on the chat on the live stream. So to start us off is the Green Wheels Capstone Project.
Okay, hi everyone. The formatting looks a little weird because we had to download it in a weird format, so just ignore that. But we are here to talk to you today about our capstone project called Green Wheels. Oh wait, sorry.
All right, so you might already know my name is Olivia. I'm studying Geographical Information Systems at the University of South Florida, Tampa.
My name is Lily. I am an environmental sciences major at North Carolina State University.
Hi, I'm Ramya. I'm an environmental science and policy and information science major at the University of South Florida, Tampa.
And I'm Kelsey. I'm a sustainability studies major at USF St. Pete.
All right, so our group focused on larger southern campuses as it was most relatable to us. And we explored the problem of colleges not incentivizing their already available renewable energy buses in order to maximize student use. This can be seen through as one of the colleges we focus on, such as USF, as they continue to sell more permits like personal parking permits that are available parking spaces. And we also drew from the case study title, Characterization of Travel Behavior at University Campuses, where they explored sustainable modes of transportation. And one of their key findings was that most sustainable, friendly colleges' campuses are those demarketing private car commuting and promoting alternate transportation instead. So this is where our project will explore through an app that will help mitigate the problem of overused personal vehicles by helping colleges to better incentivize already available renewable energy buses.
So as we can see in this graphic here, transportation is a very energy intensive industry and contributes 29% of our energy use. And only 3.7% of that is renewable, and then even less of the renewable is renewable electricity. So this is kind of like a bigger problem and like a smaller solution. So to talk a little bit more about the transportation sector in general, 28% of greenhouse gas emissions in the US are contributed by the transportation sector, and that's largely because of the burning of fossil fuels, according to the EPA. So a passenger car carrying one person emits 89 pounds of CO2 per 100 passenger miles, while a full bus emits only 14 pounds. So as we can see with this, just choosing a bus over a car already dramatically reduces your carbon footprint, but that's not even accounting for electric buses. When you choose electric buses, it reduces carbon dioxide emissions by 230,000 pounds annually compared to a diesel bus, and that's equal to planting 5,000 trees. So as we can see, that's a pretty significant impact. So to talk a little bit more about the buses themselves, one charge equals 350 miles, and college campuses are not that big. They're not 350 miles, so it can kind of last like all day. And solar energy is used to power the electric charging station. That's where the renewable energy aspect comes in. And you can see that on the right there. And these buses already exist. For example, UGA has 33 electric buses. So we just want to make sure that these buses are being used.
So now I'll start to go over the golden circle, so our why, how, and what of our projects. Thank you. So starting with our why, we wanted to create a user-friendly app that would help mitigate some of the problems you see with too many personal use vehicles versus using the already available renewable energy buses. So we, again, wanted to increase use of existing renewable energy power electric buses by incentivizing college students to take advantage of those. And we wanted to destigmatize public transportation by, within the app, promoting education of it, and then overall just reducing carbon emissions and pollution from commuter-heavy campuses. And then now going into how we will do that, Green Wheels, our app, will award points to students who ride the bus. So it will be actively collecting the amount of trips you were taking on the bus. And then students can then, when they collect those points, can redeem them for rewards. So we will be partnering with different storefronts and restaurants on campuses so they can provide little rewards or treats to students who are collecting those points. And then, like most other reward apps, students can then refer friends to use the apps throughout the campus and get bonus points, so that will help spread it.
Now actually looking at the app itself, you can see the mobile phone interface on the left. And right when you go on the home, the first thing you see is the greeting, and then underneath it, the progress bar. Here is where you'll track all the points, and you can see how much you have so you can redeem them later on. And below that, you can see the car icon and the bus icon. The car shows you how much energy it would have taken if you had gone on this trip using your own personal vehicle, your car, and versus going on this bus and how much less it is. And on the right, you can see how much you actually saved. This is an example of going 1 mile from one stop to the other. And that's also using what we found in a study of the calculation of 2.89 kilowatt hours per mile in a conventional vehicle versus an electric bus only being 2.17 kilowatt hours per mile, meaning that you save 0.72 kilowatt hours per mile just by riding our bus. And on the tabs below, you can see after the home, there's the scan option. So there's where you would scan your personal QR code to redeem these points and add them in. Then you have the trips section. Here it will track all of your trips and the one you're currently on. This is where the GPS would be incorporated as well. And then there is the information tab. This is where you would learn about renewable energy generally, specifically about our buses as well, and every aspect about renewable energy, electric vehicles, and buses. And the last tab is the rewards. This is where you could actually see the offers, the ones that you could use. Using the points that you have, there might be some options like you get a free customization on your drink and where the locations would be for you to do that. Now looking at the Sustainable Development Goals that we hope to help, the first is the quality education, SDG 4. Here we want to ensure that our university students can acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development and specifically renewable energy vehicles. And next one is the affordable and clean energy, SDG 7. Here we want to ensure the universal access to affordable, reliable, modern energy services through our bus and increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the public transportation sector. And the third SDG is sustainable cities and communities. The target here is to provide access to safe, affordable, and accessible sustainable transport systems. And last, the partnerships for the goals, SDG 17, through our collaboration with the university campus stores and restaurants, we hope to expand our network and the student base.
So now moving on to the sustainability complex. So currently we're kind of focusing more on the individual and community levels because our app is focused on encouraging individuals to prioritize sustainability and use renewable energy power transportation through the education and incentives that are offered on our app. And then just also facilitating environmental awareness and increasing usage of the buses among university communities. But we do hope to kind of expand more into the city, national, and global levels. And this will kind of just be in like a large-scale increase in renewable powered public transportation, as well as reduction of carbon emissions, reduction of pollution, and climate change mitigation. So for our social business model canvas, we have some key resources and partners and stakeholders. So the campus restaurants and stores are really important because we are a rewards app, and so if we don't have the campus restaurants and stores providing the rewards, then we're gonna have nothing to incentivize the students to use the buses. And of course the students are crucial because if the students aren't using the app, then it's essentially useless because it won't be accomplishing the goal of increasing the amount of students who are utilizing the public transportation, the renewable energy powered buses. Some other collaborations would be with the colleges and universities to just make sure that they're open to it and kind of collaborating with them to make sure that the rewards are kind of tailored to their campus and their students. And then the transportation department, that's also important, just to make sure that the bus scanners are like compatible and that they are comfortable with like using the system. And then campus student organizations and environmental funding is also really important to both spread awareness about the app, and they do allocate funding to certain environmental projects, so that could be a potential there as well. And then there is the potential of professors and students maybe working on the app, promoting it, improving it, things like that.
So a few key activities that we have. The first, as it's already been said, each student will have a personalized QR code in their app, and there will be a scanner at the front of the bus and a scanner at the back. So when you enter the bus, you will scan your QR code, and that will essentially start your trip. And then when you get off the bus, you will scan it again to end your trip. We have real-time GPS tracking systems to track the mileage on your trip. This is going to come from other apps such as Life 360 or the other transportation apps that your colleges may have. We will be collecting points based on the amount of energy that you saved in kilowatt hours per mile. And we will also be collaborating with the campus stores and restaurants to provide the rewards. And in exchange for their collaboration, we will feature free advertisements of their stores and restaurants on our app.
So our budgeting is in 3 parts. The first is the cost structure. Here, the bus scanners that we had mentioned would be around $280 to $320 each. The real-time GPS tracking software would be around $100 to $500. Looking at our surplus, we are a nonprofit organization, so the donations that we receive would be reinvested into the app and into our partners and their advertisements. And looking at revenue, we would get most of our funding from environmental and sustainability funds, on campus and off campus opportunities, and also optional donations are always welcome.
So types of intervention, our app is a service, and it's a service because it incentivizes the students to use the renewable transportation. We're going to be getting the word about our app around by using social media because college students are all on social media. And on-campus marketing, we think, would be one of the better ones to focus on each campus specifically. And then collaborations with student organizations is another way. So the people that are going to benefit from this are definitely the students because they're going to be getting rewards just for using the buses on their campus that are free to them. And also the campus stores and restaurants are going to be benefiting because it's going to bring more people in since they're getting an incentive. The customer, we would say, would be the campus stores and restaurants because in a sense they are sort of paying to like they're paying, I guess, for the app by giving us these rewards that we can incentivize the students with. So our value proposition, our beneficiary proposition, we hope to further reduce carbon emissions and pollution by incentivizing students to use these renewable buses rather than use their own personal cars. Through the info section on our app, we will be educating community members on renewable energy and also carbon emissions and carbon footprint. It will increase and improve public transportation infrastructure because of the increased use and demand of these buses. And universities can improve their transportation to meet students' needs by using the data from the GPS tracking system. We will measure our success by the amount of carbon emissions reduced based on the amount of students who use the buses and the amount of trips that they take. And we will also track the number of points gained and rewards received. For our customer value proposition, users will be able to redeem these rewards at the campus stores and restaurants based on how much energy they save. This is just an overview of our social business model.
So now to talk about the exciting future of Green Wheels. So we do hope to expand to more colleges and universities and kind of collaborate with them to offer customized incentives that fit the campus and students, kind of what they're wanting, what they need. But however, it is important to note that not all colleges and universities are kind of suited to buses. Like sometimes it might be more sustainable to walk and things like that, or the campus just might not be big enough, different things like that. So that is something that we are taking into consideration. We also hope to expand to city public transportation and kind of encourage the use of public transportation at that level as well, and just kind of encourage them not to use their personal cars like to work and things like that. So rewards would be like deals at local businesses, discounts on bus fare, and things of that nature. And then lastly, we hope to advocate on a large scale for renewable energy in public transportation. So these are just some of our references. And that's it. Thank you guys for listening. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Great presentation. So you have this right now geared towards students. Would it be available to others who kind of work on campus, or would it just be students?
So the question was if it will be, like our app is kind of geared towards students, but if it will also be available to people who work on campus. That actually is a good point that we hadn't considered, but
It kind of ties into having your ID, so anybody with a university ID, whether it be staff or or a student, can use it.
Any other questions?
So you said you had like a live GPS tracking system to track the mileage of the bus, but most buses that are on college campuses go between the same like 10 to 20 stops. So it might be more like cost efficient for you to just have that average mileage between the stops and use that instead of like the live GPS system, and then you can scan like at the bus stop for, oh, I'm getting off here, and that way you don't have to scan like as you're getting off the bus. Like it's a little bit more faster. I don't know. Did you think about like reducing cost in that area? Because like $500 is a lot for a GPS system.
Okay, so repeat it, right? She was saying that we should, instead of using the GPS tracking system, since like the stops already have like a designated like mileage and stuff in between them, that we should just go towards like the QR codes and things like that. I think kind of where we were thinking the GPS tracking system would be more for like accountability and to stop people from just like scanning the QR codes without like riding the bus and things like that. But like how we have it now is where you'd scan like when you get on and off. But that is something to think about, reducing the cost and just kind of getting rid of the GPS element altogether. I don't know if anyone wants to add on that.
Also, that tracking is useful for that one option we had on the app for trips, so they know what distances they went and like at what time they went, because that's something that would be useful if you were able to track it using the GPS coordinates.
I also saw some research how universities kind of like that information just so they can upgrade their transportation system as well. So that could be something we could even sell off to them. I mean, there's obviously some privacy stuff to incorporate in that, but that could be another advantage point for money.
Yeah.
So in talking about scaling up
So the question was, like on the university level, we're kind of partnering with the universities, but if we were to scale up to a city level, who would we partner with there? I would just kind of say like the local governments and the like transportation departments, because it would be like beneficial for the city, like reducing pollution, things like that, less congestion on the roads. So I think that would be something they'd be open to. And it also is beneficial to like local businesses by providing rewards that are at local businesses that might not get as much like attention, kind of keeping that alive and like stimulating the economy. So I think we would definitely try to be in contact with like local governments and transportation departments. And yeah, does anyone want to add?
If you were looking to expand to campuses that don't currently have renewable buses, how would you motivate them to spend a lot of money and then make an entire green fleet if you wanted to expand it on them?
Okay. So the question was for campuses that don't already have renewable buses, how we would kind of motivate them to utilize the renewable energy aspect of it. And I would just say kind of like informing them on like the benefits of it and how it would save them money in the long run, how it's more like fuel efficient, and different things like that. And yeah, just saying how it's been a success at other campuses and that might persuade them to adopt it themselves.
Also, I think the best way for us to do that is through social media. So through those platforms, we'd be able to like keep like posting about anything that how it's working out, how it's going, just like fun pictures of the bus, like all those things would really help to like spread it to a nationwide type of thing.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Would you be reaching out to your future schools and universities just as your original group, or would you have ideas of expanding to school ambassadors or sustainability students on larger campuses?
So the question was if we were to expand to other like universities, if we would kind of be doing it like as a group, or if we would do it with like sustainability students and organizations like at the campuses. I got that right? Okay. So we did kind of talk about like with the student green energy funds and like student organizations that our mission kind of aligns with, kind of partnering with them, and that definitely could be maybe like bringing one of them with us to kind of talk about how it's worked at their campus and how it's been successful there and how that could transfer to a different campus. So I would just say that maybe a little bit of a mix of both. I hope that answers your question. Does anyone want to add? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
How would you combat like accurate mileage measurement if a QR code wasn't like scanned after an individual built the bus?
Okay. So the question was, how would we combat accurate mile measurement if someone was to like not scan the QR code when they left the bus? So this is kind of where like the GPS tracking does come in if we did decide to use that. But also if they don't scan when they get off, they probably wouldn't be getting the points because that's just a way for us to like maintain accountability for that.
It would just like end their trip, so it wouldn't be a complete trip and it wouldn't be recorded. And then like Kelsey said, like you just wouldn't get the incentive. So I guess the incentive to that is students should be wanting to do that if they wanted their points.
Any other questions?
A question from online, and it's how would you plan to destigmatize public transportation? A lot of wealthy college students I've known wouldn't want to interact with like poor or houseless people. I love this, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think reread the question. Okay, so the question was, how would you like destigmatize public transportation, because a lot of wealthier college students wouldn't necessarily want to share a bus with like unhoused people and things like that. And I think it's really honestly just like if you're going on this campus bus and maybe you get a few of your friends to go with you, it becomes like almost more fun and like a normal thing. And if it's becoming like very common on campus and like a part of the culture, then I think people would kind of like get over the stigma that's kind of there, that's kind of unfairly there, I might add. But you guys want to expand?
I think a lot of our in-app features we would have, like the education tab on the app, would help just like educate them on that, the benefits of it, as well as like the fact that if you redeem someone or like show it to someone, like then you could like get bonus points for that for sharing the app with others, so you yourself could benefit it for it personally. So I think a great motivator is basically the free stuff you would get, so people could do that.
Any other questions?
I have one more statement from Jake at the university. He says that he enjoys your capstone idea, that you have incentives for students to use buses to reduce CO2. Solid plan overall, but he wants to know what the largest challenge you believe you would face starting this.
Okay. So the question is what we think the largest challenge would be. You might just wanna answer.
I personally think it would be getting some of the campus stores and restaurants to partner with us, because we're offering free advertisements, but that's really all we're offering at this point, because we're like a nonprofit and we're like not making really money. So the incentives would be better if they came from like the campus Starbucks or like the big campus stores, and I feel like they would just be the hardest to get on board.
I also think finding the funding for our like beginning project of like how it was mentioned, the GPS is pretty expensive. So are some of the other things we would need the scanners. So actually getting the green energy funds and working on those applications and getting those grants would definitely be the very first challenge that we'd have to get through.
Thank you for the great presentation. Very awesome to hear. Next up is Bountiful. Or Bountifuel.
All right. So today we're going to talk to you about our project, Bound to Fuel. If you want to go to the next slide. Our team is myself, Danny Rodriguez. I'm an MA grad from the Savannah College of Art and Design.
I'm Sofia Fejigolo. I'm a student at the University of Cincinnati.
I'm Ava Lang. I'm studying at Susquehanna University.
And I'm Kara Woodard, and I'm studying at Franklin College.
Awesome. So we're first going to start introducing you the golden circle, which is basically the why, what, and how of our idea. So our team was really interested about the concept of introducing renewable energy to farmers. We saw that there's an opportunity to not only reduce their carbon footprint, but it would also provide them with a long-term source of income. So throughout our research, we found out that actually the agricultural industry makes up about 10% of total U.S. emissions. So reducing that carbon footprint could have a very big impact. And then we also learned that 71% of U.S. farms in the state in 2018 fell into this critical zone, which meant that their profit margins are actually really low. And a lot of them are even making less than $100,000 in gross sales. So providing renewable energy is actually a really good solution that would help them not only environmentally, but economically as well. And we did see that a lot of farmers are warming up to this idea of renewables, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So as of 2017, 6.5% of U.S. farms were using renewable energy, which may seem like a low number, but it had increased by 2.7 in 5 years. So we're seeing that there's a little bit of like potential and interest that's continuing to grow. So we learned about some of the barriers that were faced. So some of these included costs, reliability, management, and refueling, and these are preventing more farmers from adopting renewable energy, aside from just this traditional kind of mindset and generational cycles about adopting new patterns and new traditions. And this leads to a substantial loss in energy potential. So there's all this just land that's not being currently used or optimized. So we believe that removing these barriers will help with a long list of benefits, including optimizing land use, creating more jobs, reducing operation costs related to energy usage, which is actually one of the biggest percentages of where that income from farmers is going to. And it would also help reduce carbon emissions. So Bound to Fuel, in a nutshell, is an all-inclusive service that simultaneously helps, on one side, farmers integrate, monitor, and manage renewable energy sources at no cost to them, as well as helping big businesses reach climate targets. So we're thinking this kind of C to B to B business model where we have a customer and we're the business, we buy from this customer and we end up selling to another business. And Sophia will talk a little bit more about this moving forward, but keep that in mind. And then we kind of saw these 4 like key opportunity areas. So these are kind of our 4 strategies. So one, we really wanted to be mindful of place, like geography. So we're gonna create a service that is customizable for different land integrations. So there's several farms that wouldn't be apt for solar use, but some might be. Some farms would really benefit from wind, others might not, depending on where they are geographically. Process. So we found that convenience and lower cost is a really big part of these incentives. So a lot of these farmers have like good intentions and they want to convert to renewable, but they're not always able to. So having a service that's convenient and low cost will allow that to turn intention into action. For people, we were initially targeting younger and educated audiences because we believe that they're more likely to be like early adopters. We want to create ultimately like a ripple effect and be able to target all types of farmers, but starting with kind of this younger generation or people that are already open to the idea of renewable energy is a good kind of like way in. And technology, so incentives, supportive policies, and partnerships are what ultimately will provide the reassurance that these farmers need, that just selling them on like the climate energy, like going up to them and being like, you know, like put renewable energy in your farms because it's great for the climate. That alone might not do as well as having these types of technologies integrated.
So what we'll be doing is, of course, assessing where we would be doing this in communities, understanding like what our investment could be in that community in general, and beyond that, the individual farms, seeing like what we could put on the farms, and etc. And we would probably be using programs to do that. After we've made our initial assessment, we would do outreach to fully connect with the community. So that could be through educational programs, etc., having representatives, which I will talk about more later. After we've made our connections with the farmers, we would go into consulting. So we would go out into the field, see what worked best for those farmers, see what they're interested in even doing, try to take baby steps, of course, for getting them on board. And that would also involve like some permitting. After that, we go into installation and maintenance. So obviously we would try to coordinate with the farmers to see what seasons would work best for them for installation, whether that it's like moving some cattle around or waiting for the winter. So crops, there's just cover crops. And then after that, maintaining, so hopefully training some people in the community and also setting up like a deadline for like how long we'd be working with them. Okay, so what we would also be doing is a lot of outreach. So in terms of the farmer, there would be a lot of education in the community. So connecting with like adult groups, if farmers have like unions or any of that stuff in the area. And that would be also youth programs like 4-H groups that would spur the new generation into being more involved with this energy transition. We would have community representatives, which would be like officials that we've communicated with and could best represent and speak to the farmers about things that are more like close to home and we might not completely understand culturally. And then of course we have our own ambassadors that would show face and try to make our intentions known. On the business side, we would have a lot of partnerships. This could be through like legitimacy, like showing that we know what we're doing and having like that spread, or also just like partnering with like a larger company like Google or Amazon and saying like, hey, we're starting this up. Are you interested for the business side of things, which we'll talk about later. And then we have search optimization like engines. So keywords and articles, hopefully if we made news with like any educational programs on like different properties, it would be known in the news. And then lastly, where it would be focusing would be demographics, like the breadbasket of like America, and also like globally, like America or United States of America is considered the breadbasket of the world. So we'd have to look at like policy and regulations in individual states to see if that would coordinate with our intentions. And then also there's behavioral intentions, so seeing like where populations are changing, the thought processes.
Okay, so diving deeper into our business model and more details, we would obviously need resources, the farmland, the actual territory where we would install those renewable energy infrastructures, capital, money, where is it coming from? We want to offer this to farmers no cost, so we would need the investment and educational materials for the trainings for people in the community for installing and maintaining renewable energy infrastructures, and also renewable energy certifications. Key activities, aside from what Ava mentioned, we also have like climate currency trading, which I'll touch on the next slide. Cost structure would be mainly renewable energy infrastructure, the actual technology, salaries of employees, administrative costs, and transportation/travel for our employees. All our surplus would go back into the business or as donations for communities' activities. Segments, our beneficiaries are farmers, the community and society in general, and our customers, who are we selling it to and getting the revenue from, would be businesses trying to achieve their climate goals. And then revenue will be carbon credits and renewable energy certifications, which I'll explain next slide, and also grants for governments and other entities. Okay, so basically on the last couple of years, there has been an increased worry for our climate, and that has reflected on customers and employees, pressuring companies to become more sustainable, and this has led companies to set climate goals. This could be like carbon emission reduction goals and renewable energy transition. So what we want to do is basically enable farmers to get and sell the carbon credits, and also decrease their energy consumption. So we'll basically help them install renewable energy technology so that they can have renewable energy certificates, and also go through the process of selling their carbon credits, and we would get the revenue from a percentage of those carbon credits, and also mainly from renewable energy certificates. When energy comes through like utilities to companies, it's hard to really pinpoint if that energy is really renewable. So those certificate actually certifies that the energy generated is renewable, and companies are really interested and they buy those in bulk. So what we would be essentially doing would be getting the surplus, all the energy that wasn't used by the farmers, and sell them to the companies as RECs. And then a value proposition for farmers would be energy cost reduction, higher yield, which would translate into a competitive advantage. They're reducing their cost, so they can reduce their price, and the price and quality will give them a competitive advantage. How are we measuring our success? KPIs, basically how much energy we're generating, how much is there an increase in the yield, are we democratizing and accessibilizing knowledge of renewable energy for farm and rural communities. And then customer value proposition for businesses would kind of go towards the brand image and ESG reports and their public relations, but also regulation and compliance. And yeah. And then for partners would be renewable energy professionals, whoever is installing, if it's third parties or if we're training people in the community. Also maintenance, consultants, NGOs that are providing those trainings. Government, carbon credits, value stream companies. We're not actually, it's not our primary activity doing the carbon credits, we're just facilitating it, so it's important to have them as partners. And for RECs, whoever is giving them the certificates depends on state, but they're the regional tracking systems. And stakeholders, farmers, communities, our employees, and investors.
Okay, so some environmental and ethical considerations would be obviously the renewable energy installation and reliability. So of course, like in some areas where it's really dusty, like solar energy might not work, or like there might be a lot of erosion, and that's a consideration. Also the fact that a lot of our energy like might not be carbon neutral in the beginning, so we'll have to calculate for that. And then also we're going to be profiting off of the credits. So technically farmers can go through this process and make money off of credits. It's like a little bit of a difficult process, and maybe they don't have the background or skills to go through it themselves, so that's why we're facilitating it. Also, we are going to be interrupting some family traditions on farms. It's not going to look the same as it did in the past, but the hope with educating the newest generation is that we would have some people that have already accumulated some knowledge and what that could look like in the future. And then we also are offsetting, and like companies may be greenwashing. So technically they're mitigating for the fact that they aren't using renewable energy or they have too many carbon emissions. So it's not necessarily solving the problem that the companies are creating, but it's a good investment for renewable energy.
So these are the main 6 sustainable development goals that we're targeting. 7 and 11 have already been touched on in our previous slides. However, 8, we feel that communities would grow from the opportunities that we are bringing to them. So the jobs for maintenance installation that we are bringing to the community, we feel that would establish more economic growth. 12, the community will be more able to sustain itself. Much like what we've seen in Iceland, the communities can produce their own energy, they can produce their own crops, and then they share them with their neighbors. So we feel we could bring that to those communities. And then 9 and 17 sort of tie together. We're trying to find innovative partners and practices to bring into these communities. So our sustainability complex, we're targeting mainly individual, household, and community, but we're also hoping to see some national, state, and global involvement. So at the individual level, we're hoping to see farmers reduce their individual carbon footprint by implementing solar or wind or renewable energy into their land. At the household level, they'll be creating a renewable and self-reliant energy source for their farms, while also challenging generational cycles. Farmers whose grandparents really weren't into renewable energy are able to break that stigma in their community. Within the community, then, we'd be creating rewarding jobs for locals. We'd be establishing educational programs that would inform of the renewable energy that we're implementing. The energy surplus would be shared to the community, and we're hoping to establish that kind of independence that we've seen here in Iceland, where they can sustain themselves. At the national and state/global level, we're hoping to kind of see that ripple effect that Danny already touched on as far as the sustainability movement in rural communities that will spread as they grow. These are our references. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
I was wondering, so when you were talking about farms and you were pulling together your stats, was there a certain size of farms that you were looking at, or was there like an average, or was it including all scale farms from like small family operations to like larger agricultural production?
Yeah, I think it was like, they were asking if the farms that, and let me rephrase it, like if the when we were doing the research, were the farms that we looking at like a collection, or was it small, or was it large? Like what kind of where the data was coming from? Is that correct? So I think it was like a combination. Like I think it was like a kind of a U.S. average, and that included both like large and like smaller like farms. Is that correct?
The average farm size in 2022 for the U.S. is 445 acres. Obviously, that's an average, but we looked into like number-wise with the average, but I feel like targeting more like family size to small and medium. Yeah.
So you talked about the initial investment of it being free for the farmer, like cost-free. How about any ongoing maintenance or repair or any of those items?
Talk about that. So we would have to set up sorry. She was asking if there's like ongoing costs for maintenance. So one of the things that we definitely wanted to push was people being trained in the community to do these repairs, and that would create employment opportunities. So that's like a long-term possibility. But also in our negotiations, we definitely would have like a contract for how long we would support them for. It wouldn't be forever. I would probably say, depending on the farm size and like the resources in the area, like maybe like 15 years. So they would have to definitely develop some independency.
And also in those initial states where we are going to support them, looking into other revenue streams, like companies wanting to not donate but like invest, and also having set aside a like fund for those things that are unpredictable will definitely be something that we would look at while developing the business model. Yeah. Yeah, the question is if there's a baseline for a number of megawatts that a farm needed to produce to have a renewable energy certification. Is that what you ask? All the research I did, didn't see like precisely a number, but it's definitely something that we need to do. We can look into it more.
Dependent on like state and local level.
Yeah,
as well.
that's true.
So we'd have to look into the policies that are in sorry everyone, that are in that like local government system and in the state, because that would also go into like the whole permitting process that we'd have to do on that level.
Any other questions? Yes. Yeah.
So one thing is that there are some solar developers who scope out farms as a type of incentive, because dual ag is like an incentive that helps both parties. So I would just recommend, I wonder if you would plan to partner with developers, or if that's something that could just be a recommendation.
So the question, I'm going to simplify it a little bit, was whether or not we'd be planning to partner with those programs, those companies that are already looking into partnering with farmers. And I think that would be the intention. A lot of the research I was doing was on the agrivoltaics, about implementing solar into fields where sheep can graze under the solar panels, and it's a very mutual relationship. So I definitely think that would be an intention to work with people that are already doing it.
Like the third parties.
Yeah. Just compliment that. Like our whole concept behind it, we wanted to make it really simple and add value to farmers. So like we know that we're using that space, but we wanted to do it in innovative ways of integrating it into the farmer's life so that they can benefit from it without actually like, obviously it will be for renewable energy, but like having other ways that they could benefit from it. And as Danny said, like we're always not trying to like reinvent the wheel, but like partner with startups and other companies that have those innovative technologies and ways of integrating it. So yeah.
So farmers are like huge on tradition, and so I'm just kind of curious, how would that kind of transition process go from what they're used to what you are pushing for this? Like, what would the I guess timeline kind of look like with that?
We'll talk a little bit about that. Definitely, I'd say. Oh, sorry. He was asking about like how the transition process would look like for very traditional farmers into renewable energy. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so obviously, like going into like pinpointing our communities, I think that we'd have to start with communities that already have shown some progress in sustainability, whether that be like they are working on riparian buffers on their farm and like forming some of their land. It definitely has to have a mindset first for that first process to begin. But there's a lot of incentives for farmers that we touched on for them to switch over into renewable energy. I think that a lot of the support from their community would also be part of that. We would have those like community like representatives that would like go in and check on them, see how they're doing, like baby steps, like, hey, would you be interested in trying out this new like technology that we found? We think it would look really good on your farm, or it would be like great for your production. So definitely like baby steps. It is really tough with that community because they are very traditional. But I think that there's a lot of tactics that can be used. Do you want to touch on that too?
Yeah. And we've seen that there has been like a good push, like there has been like some progress over time. And I think what we wanted to do was originally identify who those like early adopters would be. So that's like younger generations of farmers or communities. Like we saw in our research, like highly populated areas are more likely to adopt this technology or are already like adopting this technology. So once we identify like who those like kind of innovators, early adopters would be to like hop on, once they kind of start adopting, like the kind of curve like goes really fast. So it's just getting like kind of those first people, and then hopefully it'll create kind of what we mentioned, that ripple effect.
So this was like the original goal of the project, was to target those farmers that wouldn't traditionally be on board for it. And really it wasn't to change their minds. We're not going to come in and have them take classes on how good renewable energy is. The idea was to provide that incentive to be like, oh, we'll do this for you for free and look at everything you'll get in addition to it. Then we would start that kind of awareness and education at a younger level, so their children, their grandchildren, just the community, youth groups, 4-H groups, that kind of stuff. That's where you would begin that grassroots movement, because you won't be able to change the minds of those farmers that have been on that land for years, but really providing that incentive to just get it started will be the main movement. Yeah.
So like I've done some nonprofit work for trying to get farmers on board for riparian buffers, like I mentioned before. And honestly, one of the tactics that we've used for people that won't budge is, to just keep connecting with them. Over the years, a lot of these are family farms and get passed down. So, once a farm gets passed down, we can always reach out to that newest generation. It's just, like really important, like keeping that connection, like ongoing, like that relationship with those farmers, because you never know what the next generation is going to think. And that goes into our educational programs.
Any more questions? Yes. Or, oh.
I was just, because it kind of seems like this is great. I love it, by the way. But there's just kind of like a lot, like it's the farmers and the businesses and like the youth programs. I was just wondering like where your like starting point is going to be, like how you guys are just going to like get things going and like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I can talk about that. So she asked if where exactly is our starting point, because there are many facets to the business model. Obviously, I think everything starts with funding. So to get things going, I think we would rely on investors and that initial investment to really partner up with renewable energy infrastructure, and then do the outreach to the community and pinpoint like a farm to test out this process. And then with that money, generate the energy and start returning the initial investment and hitting out from that. But yeah, it's a good question. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for the great presentation. Bound to fuel. Next up, we have Babes Making Waves.
Okay. Hello, we are Babes Making Waves, and we're here to make a splash. So I'm going to be going over the agenda. First, we're going to start out with why we exist, our SDGs, the sustainability complex, our golden circle business model, and then the feasibility of the business, and finally, the future of Babes Making Waves. So number one, why do we exist? So here's our value proposition, and we are looking to provide an innovative solution to bolster energy reliability and resiliency for island nations using our wave energy buoy technology. So our approach empowers islands to strengthen their grid systems, ensuring stable electricity during blackouts, which can be caused by natural disasters. And we have kind of two purposes, and that would be generating power and offering offshore energy storage, as well as transforming challenges into opportunities. So with a commitment to innovation, environmental responsibility, and energy equity, you can count on us to make waves. And number 2, our Sustainable Development Goals. So we apply to 5 different SDGs. As a fully female-owned and operated business in a kind of male-dominated industry, we focus a lot on gender equality, and we also kind of try to apply to this by hiring females within these islands that are looking for a career without a degree. And looking at SDG number 7, which is affordable and clean energy, this applies to us as our wave-powered energy is completely clean, affordable to the people, as we're looking at having it funded by governments. And then SDG number 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure, applies to us as we are constantly looking to innovate our technology and apply it to make a stronger infrastructure for the islands that are going to be using it. And then we have SDG number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, which applies to us as we are looking to create a sustainable way for the communities within the islands to have power during natural disasters. And of course, this all ties into SDG number 13, which is climate action, as our wave energy will be offsetting carbon emissions and giving a renewable source of energy to the islands completely clean. Now we're going to be looking at number 3, which is our sustainability complex and the case study. As you can see in our triangle here, we have circled national and state levels, as well as regional and province levels. And we've circled these because our systems are designed to aid island populations during low power situations, as I said, with the natural disasters. And in the future, we would be looking at having private individuals or businesses buy into our wave buoys, but as of now, we are just looking to aid populations funded by the government. Okay.
All right, moving into our case study. So we'll be talking about the U.S. Virgin Islands as an example for how this wave energy technology could be implemented. So just an overview of the Virgin Islands. They have a population of less than 100,000 residents, and the majority of the energy that they generate, as you can see in the graphic here, is propane, which makes up 67%, fuel oil, which makes up 30%, and solar power, any sort of renewable energy power, which is 3%. So it just goes to show that they have a low reliance on clean energy. So this is a great business opportunity for Babe Making Waves to come in and support them. So in terms of utilization, as I mentioned, 70% of the petroleum consumption being used on the island is distillate fuel and residual fuel, usually because they have to import it onto the island, which also makes cost of energy very expensive for residents. Currently, as of 2022, they pay 41 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity, which is 3 times the US average. So in alignment with the U.S. Virgin Islands clean energy goals, which is to reduce fossil fuel-based energy consumption by 60% by 2025, and to generate 30% of peak capacity from renewable energies by 2025, they have very large goals, and they could use our support to help them with that. So the main takeaways is to really provide an alternative generation of electricity for the residents to decrease their electricity utility bills, as well as decreasing their reliance on oil and providing cleaner energy solutions. Now I'll pass it off to Tina for the Golden Circle.
So what are we? We are a wave energy company that markets wave converting buoys to the island hotspots in order to provide resiliency for blackouts for energy storage through batteries. And then why? Because we want to provide clean, renewable energy to these island countries in order to assist their resilience, especially to climate change impacts such as hurricanes and then that causing blackouts. We also want to bridge that gap of gender inequality as mentioned before. And then to do this, we will have third parties engineer buoys that we will purchase from them in order to convert wave energy into storage and then collaborate with them and help advance our technology and our system. Our team is responsible for different business marketing and local stakeholder engagements. So for our buoy technology, it is linked to an underwater steel cable that will be anchored down with a biogenic limestone made with algae. And then this cable will incorporate different columns of magnets that moves with the vertical motion of the waves that have generating coils. And with this dynamic, it helps generate electric currents and then convert it into energy. And then here is like a rough sketch of our system. So we would have 5 buoys, and then down below is like the ocean floor and the anchoring system. And then off to the right side is the storage facility that would be located on store. And within the buoys, we have that battery pack that will hold all of our energy. And then we also drew like some seaweed that could possibly be grown in the system. And then next will be our business model.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. All right. So in terms of key resources, some of the tangible resources are the wave energy buoys themselves, as well as the technology infrastructure, which mainly deals with the battery pack, as well as our partnerships with manufacturing facilities and our logistic and distribution networks, which are essentially the cables that were shown in the last slide that connect the energy transmission to onshore, as well as our research and development center and maintenance and support infrastructure. In terms of intangible resources, we have our IP, which, as we mentioned, this has not been done before, so we would have an IP on it, but we would also be open to innovation culture, so sharing with other people who are interested in learning more about developing this kind of technology, as well as our brand reputation, our expertise and talent that we hire, our partnerships, understanding the regulatory knowledge of implementation, as well as our data analytics and insights. All right, in terms of our partners, it would mostly be grid operators, utility providers, government agencies, and private investors. We've listed a few other ones, such as research institutions and universities, which we'll get more into a little bit later, but we do hope to have some kind of education and outreach program as well to kind of help, as we mentioned before, with the gender equity gap and helping educate females on wave energy. In terms of activities, as I mentioned before, since this is a new and innovative technology, there's a lot of money and activity going into the research and development, as well as manufacturing and assembly, siting and permitting applications to make sure that we're placing the buoys in safe environments so we're not hurting marine species, as well as, again, just data collection and analysis, which is essential to making sure that we're maximizing the energy that we get from the buoys, as well as making sure, again, environmental impact assessments and also ecotourism. So as you saw in the last slides, we hope to provide tours to the sites where people could scuba dive or, just kind of see and learn how the systems work.
Okay, and so in terms of customers and distribution, our project will be helping island residents, governments aiming to switch to more renewable sources, connecting with wave energy experts for continued research and development, as well as industries who want to implement and maximize clean energy. And then for who will pay, it would be utility companies, government agencies, private investors, and possibly energy taxes with future development. And then this is covering the environmental costs and benefits. Realistically, with our project, there may be some loss or weakness of marine habitats due to establishment of the buoy project. This could also eventually affect marine life and species. Secondly, some potential preparation disruption to ocean floor when installing or connecting the unit. Thirdly, impacts of leakage and release of oils or chemicals from the battery if it's damaged due to heating or contamination. However, on the beneficial side, it is renewable energy. This contributes to reducing global greenhouse gas emissions, which means it's emitting zero gas. And then secondly, it provides restoration for seaweed forests that's growing on the buoys or the buoy cables. And this creates availability of the food and habitat for marine life. Lastly, does not require land space nor creates damage to land or degradation of island itself. And then for societal costs and benefits, the first cost would be the cost of time to request and receive permits or licenses to install energy units. Rules and restrictions to access the site location may be set into place. Thirdly, affecting space for incoming and departing ships, including fishing. On the beneficial side, there could be increases in independence and security of having a local energy backup supply, and it lowers the risk of future fossil fuel prices. Thirdly, it stimulates creation for new job opportunities and economic development. And lastly, increase in ecotourism and revenue due to stable development, high quality environment. And moving on to, there you go.
So going over the cost review, some of our fixed costs, similar to the intangible and tangible resources that I mentioned, would be the actual technology itself, the buoys, the cables, the cement to anchor it into the floor, as well as our substation and storage facility, construction costs, as well as variable costs, which would just be our operations on shore, the electricity that we would generate, our pricing for that, as well as maintenance for operations, so staff, making sure that we have people who are keeping check of the buoys themselves, as we mentioned, research and development, and salaries.
So the estimated cost of a buoy system is between 2 to 4 million for its lifetime. So within the aspect of the Virgin Islands, it would be 0.02% to 0.05% of their amount. And then on the left side is just the breakdown of the different materials that is required for the buoy system. And for our revenue, we are hoping to get money from the U.S. Department of Energy, NGOs, kelp harvesting and restoration, ecotourism, as well as private investors. And then I'm going to pass it to Imani.
All right, so how exactly is our project feasible? So first, our project can be funded through various avenues, ranging from share investors to NGOs to government agencies. For example, last year, 2022, the United States Department of Energy announced that they were providing roughly $25 million in wave energy. So that's like one example of something that we could apply to for in the beginning. Our project is also highly researched. There is significant research on wave energy in society today, and we can use examples of different companies who have done similar things to basically learn from their precedent projects. Our company is also realistic. Realistically, we could create a prototype, implement it into the Virgin Islands, like we were saying for our test project, and then from there we could expand further. And lastly, we want to make sure that we are going like to our stakeholders and making sure that we check in and ask for not so much permission, but make sure that everyone is pleased in a way. So we would want to talk to local communities and NGOs and ask for any feedback or any concerns they have about our project. Although we are highly feasible, there still may be some challenges that we run into along the way. This could be maintenance, costs, location, and the algae anchors. So with maintenance, obviously, our systems are going to be in the ocean. They're going to be exposed to corrosive salt, storms, waves, which will over time probably degrade them. We're going to be in charge of having to bring the new materials, bring our personnel to fix that, and also transport any replacement parts. So that could be something that would be a challenge along the way. The costs for all of that would also have to be taken into consideration. It does cost for you to buy all those parts, bring all those people down. If we also did want to upscale, that would be pricey too. We would have to hire more people and also get more equipment. The location of our buoys is also something that might be a challenge along the way. So not everywhere is going to have the ideal oceanographic conditions that we want for wave energy. So maybe someone is interested, but we might simply not be able to install it due to the fact that it's not accessible for wave energy, or the ocean floor, for example, isn't ideal for us to install the buoys. Lastly, the algae anchors. We did want to be sustainable in the fact of making an anchor system that wasn't made out of cement, but they're only roughly 25 kilograms, and we don't know in terms of like the actual build if it's able to anchor down all those buoys at once. So it might not be something that's totally feasible. And so Babes with Waves has high hopes for the future. We're looking to possibly expand to other areas that aren't just islands. So any coastal areas, really, we want to provide this sustainable energy for them. We also want to open up our golden circle to possibly personal clientele, so people on the individual level. Maybe they have a home situated on the coast and they're looking for sustainable energy storage that's could be us. And finally, we wanted to open up some programs for young students and young professionals. We would want to teach them about what exactly is wave energy, why it's important, and what the future of wave energy looks like, so that maybe they get curious in terms of an occupation in that sector. All right, any questions? Yep.
Has your groups considered what would occur if there were a tropical storm that would hit your system and what your response would be?
So she asked, has our group considered what we would do if the system was basically like put up to a storm in a situation?
So to answer that question, Tia and I were also talking about like a scenario like that. We thought about maybe installing some sort of software technology to where it would be a system that could alert us before the storm is going to hit. So maybe it's tracking like the currents or even just like the weather conditions. So then we can maybe pull back the buoys before like there's damage or anything like that. Yeah. Yes.
In terms of research for long-term effects of the local ecology or ecosystems, has that been considered yet?
I guess for ecological. Oh yeah. So she just asked if we've considered any long-term ecological effects based on our project. The ones that we could were the ones involving like the ocean floor. I think that could end up being like a long-term effect just because based on how long it takes to like regrow habitats or ecosystems that are down there, those are pretty critical. So those are some of the ones that we've considered. Yeah.
And quickly, just to add on, that is why we did consider alternative substitutes to materials. So that way, the buoy system themselves are sustainable and friendly for the environment that they're in, which is also why we mentioned the potential for seaweed harvesting or other kind of vertical farming in the ocean to support wildlife there. Yeah? Riley? Or, sorry. So the question was, in terms of education, how would we get people to buy into our company or the technology itself? So as Imani mentioned with the feasibility slide, there are a lot of government incentives right now in terms of the US specifically, where companies can get subsidies on investments. So that kind of helps cut the cost of initial capital. But in terms of upskilling, that is also something that we would like to put in with those grants and funding to be able to educate the people who would essentially work for our business.
Have you guys considered the maintenance cost of introducing better materials for the environment? Because with that, more things will grow on it, including like products and stuff, which can reduce movement in your system. How are you going to play that, that balancing act between maintenance and like ecological health?
Anybody? Okay, so the question was, in terms of maintenance costs, how we would be able to tackle those issues when they come up. So such as like the algae cement and that kind of thing. Obviously, there would be high maintenance costs. That is definitely something we considered. But another thing that we considered to offset those costs is kind of just like, I think the ecotourism aspect of it as well kind of helps add an extra stream of revenue that can help us put money towards those costs. But we also recognize that it's going to be a continuing like R&D learning environment for us. And also just making sure that before we actually create the prototypes and implement them, that they're ready to go and there's no risks associated with that. Yes. Great.
Could you find any companies that currently like engineer and produce the buoys that you would like partner with? Or is that
There's a bunch.
So there's like 185 different companies currently that are on market. There was a company, I don't remember their name, but they re-engineered like the buoy system to be 95% efficient in collecting AWS. AWS was the name of the company, to be like efficient. So possibly partnering up with them if they allow like, if they sell the buoys to us. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, on a different stream, but related to the earlier questions. You guys were talking about like encouraging the growth of seaweed and seaweed forests, like to refuel the local ecology there. But also, like I feel like if you're building the buoys, you would be looking for places that wouldn't have the wildlife there in order to not harm them. Like, would you want to have them in like different areas in the system, or just?
Yeah, sorry. Kind of forgot to highlight distance. So they would be semi close to like onshore, close to shore. Like they wouldn't be too far out. But again, going back to like key activities, like environmental impact assessment is very essential to like, and the siting and permitting of like where we would put them, because that is something that we considered, especially with the cables, because we have to make sure that the cables can run back to the onshore facility. But yeah,
I could add to that, like just I think where we would develop and install this unit or our system, we would have to be very like careful and mindful of like where we're putting it, and trying not to. We would avoid putting it in places where there is like very critical ecosystems, such as like coral reefs or like where there is a marine hotspot of like life. So I think that.
Just to add something extra to that, oftentimes wherever there's something man-made placed in the water, things will start to grow. Like it'll start out small and then add and seaweed and fish will start to gather. So even if we start in a place where there's not a lot of, I guess, biodiversity, it will actually start to kind of promote that in places where there wouldn't be in the first place, which I think is an added plus.
go ahead.
I'm just curious, like you said there's like 185 companies that like are making wave energy buoys. Why why isn't it being used like more frequently? I guess it's not something that's really talked about so much. Like in places like the Virgin Islands where they have like a huge renewable energy goal, why is it not already being used?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, given that there are so many wave energy companies currently, why isn't the technology more commonly known, I guess? And I think part of that is because there's still challenges in terms of the technology as far as like we were talking about like energy loss during transmission, because it can generate a lot of energy. It's just hard to get the energy back to the source. And also, you asked about like why aren't more islands?
Islands like the Virgin Islands like already implementing it, even though they're already like working on renewable energy
Oh,
stuff.
right. And then okay, so adding on to that, as you saw earlier, they only use 3% of renewable energy, and I think it's largely because of obviously funding, but also feasibility, like we mentioned, in terms of the education. So a lot of these companies don't necessarily have all these other elements included in their business model. So that would kind of also make our business more unique. And also the battery storage was an added element that we didn't see in any other wave energy technology, which we thought would be essential for islands who have power outages and could use that extra storage.
Another thing they faced was like efficiency. Some wave companies have explored combining wave converting energy and solar to maximize like the space of the system as well.
I think it just boils down to money at the end of the day. Like, we looked at the cost stuff. It's not cheap. You would need a lot of funding for this stuff, and maybe they're just not willing to right now put that much money into something like that, but it will profit at the end for long term. So we just kind of have to get on the whole explanation process as to why it's more efficient to use this way. Any more questions?
This is just something small to add that we found during research when it comes to cost. I think it was the Virgin Islands specifically made around $686 million in income through the tourism industry alone. So although they're small, they're very mighty for tourism. And I think with the cost combined, it comes to, what was it, about 9% of that. Of the tourism industry, 0.02 to 0.05% of what that 686 million would be to have the funding for this. So although it is expensive, it is, I believe, feasible for the islands to do this. Is that all?
Good job, guys.
All right. Thank you so much for the great presentation. Next up, we have Sans.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming to our presentation. We are SANS, or the Sustainable and Novel Depository Storage System. I'm Cabot Miller and I study International Resource Management at Antioch University.
And I'm Neil Del Savio. I study environmental science at University of South Florida in Tampa.
My name is Gray. I study chemical engineering at NC State University.
Hello, my name is Sean DeLucia, and I got my master's from Rochester Institute of Technology.
I'm Jesper Mackey, and I study environmental science at the University of Portland.
So to get us started, today we are going to look at our golden circle, the SDGs, the background, and our business canvas, model canvas, as well as our technology, our business advantages, our costs and our cost structure, and then what our revenue and surplus will look like. Then finally, we'll get into our partners, funding, and stakeholders, as well as our channels and our sustainability complex. So to start it off, here is our golden circle. Our why, we wanted to look at reducing load on the electrical system while reducing dependence on non-sustainable batteries. So increasing the overall resilience of the grid through diversification. Our how, we are hoping to do this by storing renewable energy surplus, and also by designing, building, and implementing with sustainable storage systems. And then the what, we're going to do all this by creating thermal sand batteries that can be scaled across to different size communities.
Okay, so these are the three sustainable development goals that we're going to be focusing on for this project. First, we have number 7, which is affordable and clean energy. So our technology will be able to provide a more sustainable and consistent method of storing renewable energy for communities. Then we have number 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. We're going to go into a little bit more detail with certain prototypes that have been created with this technology and how our design improves and innovates on these previous designs and the advantages that our idea has over these previous designs. And then number 11, we have sustainable cities and communities. So one of the biggest benefits of our product here is that we're going to be able to diversify the power grid and create a more reliable source of renewable energy in the event of, say, natural disasters, any other kind of power outages or malfunctions within the grid. And we're going to be using sustainable materials, recycling things such as storage containers to create our batteries. And so a little bit of background on why we're doing this. So as you can see here, 45.2% of U.S. residential consumption of energy is for space heating and water heating. And the reason why this is an issue when it comes to renewable energy is that while renewable energy is good and it doesn't burn fossil fuels and it's good for the environment, there is an unfortunate lack of ways to store that energy for later. Say if you have a really windy day and then for weeks there's no wind, or if you live in a place where solar can be either really good or really bad. So renewables often create excess electricity depending on the time and the weather conditions like this. So this technology will help store that energy and keep it for later so that communities will have stored energy in the event that they need it in the future, and we'll go more in detail with that with the technology.
And here's our business model canvas, and it's showing it, and we'll go more in depth to each of them during the presentation. So here's a little explanation on our technology and how it works. So we take our renewable energy source. In this example, it's a solar panel system, but this can be directly applicable to different renewable energy sources, a wind turbine. Then we can even in the future add to concentrated solar thermal or even geothermal applications. But in this case, electricity is fed into a resistive heating coil. This heats the air through our system. Our system is then fed into an array of steel ducts with the heated air, heating our sand battery to temperatures up to 600 degrees Celsius. So this can heat, and sand is a great medium for keeping and holding on to heat within our insulated battery. This is a huge advantage as it stabilizes the fluctuations from both the electrical grid usage and renewable energy sources, both of which fluctuate a lot. So in this diagram, you can see during the day, the sun charges up the battery. At night, you can use the stored heat from the battery to heat the house. So this is possible for both water and space heating in our systems, depending on the infrastructure of the residences, if they have water radiators to space heat the house. So there are definitely some examples of current very recent prototypes of similar technology to our own, including the Finland company Polar Night Energy, partnering with the local energy utility company there to make a large sand battery silo. This could store up to 8 megawatt hours of energy in thermal heat energy. Their company released that it cost about $200,000 of production costs and could heat up to about 100 homes and a swimming pool. So this is definitely for district heating usage, so an entire area. And then another successful prototype was at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania at their Energy Research Center, producing different sizes at 310 and 150 kilowatt hours of thermal energy. So those are some of our competitors. This is why our product could be better and why it's better to current uses of energy storage other that don't use sand. So it's a huge benefit to the grid, charging during non-peak hours. If we're getting from the local electricity grid, we can charge up the thermal energy at night when no one else is using it, use it for heating during the day. It's another huge resilience factor. So our sand battery could store up the heat, and then if it goes off the grid or the renewable energy source is no longer available, it can provide roughly 2 weeks of heating, and heating is necessary for human survival in a lot of locations. So it's really helpful. And then our biggest advantage over competitor companies is our lower cost and more sustainable materials that we would use to build. So we can show in our cost analysis afterwards that we are cheaper than that $200,000 mark that other companies used, and we also use more sustainable materials, recycled used shipping containers, things that can be recycled, unlike lithium-ion battery systems that are hard to degrade, harder to recycle. And then we did an energy estimate based on the successful Finland company, comparing the mass of our sand estimate to their mass of sand and how much energy they could store with a proportion, and using estimated 95% efficiency compared to their 99 to 100% efficiency to get 9.4 megawatt hours of energy, roughly.
And next, we have our first year costs. So we're a startup, so we need money. So we have our facilities, renting, our team of 5 roughly, some engineering and some grant writers and whatnot. And then we have our materials, which we'll see later that we don't need all that much money for. And miscellaneous costs, because everything always goes wrong in engineering. So our first year cost estimate is at $711,000. So here's our key resources and cost structure. So our cost per unit boils down to be a little bit less than $50,000, which is about a quarter of what our competitors need to pay to make theirs. You'll see that one of our lowest prices is our shipping container and our low-grade sand. So these are like the 2 largest and heaviest components that we need, and they are the cheapest because we are recycling them. And our retail price for the product is, we haven't ironed out the details yet, but between $100,000 and $175,000 to help support our growing business further down the line. So, growing our business. All of our profits will be reinvested into research and development of our product, such as product enhancement, which means creating bigger silos, smaller silos for individual use, rather than like a district heating, what we have now. Upscaling, so we want to be all over the Northeast, all over the North America and Canada, and then maybe eventually in Europe. And increasing our workforce, all of that is going to come with more people, more engineers, more installation and service people.
So yeah, here's a breakdown of where our revenue will come from. So as you can see, 50% is government funding, 30% is private funding, and 5% is service, and then 15% is sales. So moving into our key partners and stakeholders, RG&E is the regional energy utility. So it's Rochester Gas and Electric. And they are going to act as not only our partner, but also our funder and our customer. So creating a mutualistic, beneficial relationship with them will help us and them to work together to grow and expand energy options and to enhance the grid for anyone in the region. So, like I said, they will be not only helping to fund us to get our start for our first year and development and research, but they will also be the ones who would actually be buying the product to implement it in the region. And they could also act as a partner for us when we apply for different funding opportunities, which I'll get into in a minute. But the main beneficiaries of this product would be the residents and the property owners, who would be having a lowered cost of energy, and as well having an increased access to renewable energy that is captured. So this would overall benefit them by lowering their bill, but also by increasing the amount of resiliency and strength within the energy system overall. And so one of the ways that we could get our funding, a large option we found, is through the IRA that was passed in January by Biden. It's called PACE, so Powering Affordable Clean Energy. We could partner with RG&E and then apply together for this loan forgiveness program. which could offer 20 to 40% loan forgiveness based on the community that we are offering the energy to. And this would be a grant that would offer us between $1 and $100 million. So that would be a really great way to get us started with our funding. And yeah, Jesper is gonna introduce some other options.
Yeah, so there's also lots of grants and funding opportunities available through the Department of Energy for us. Specifically, these are Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer grants, which are eligible for small businesses conducting research and development in energy sciences, energy production, environmental management, among many other things, but those are the three categories that really apply to our product. And as long as these products have the potential for commercialization, which ours definitely does, and the DOE has a budget of over $300 million for this. And specifically under the DOE is the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and they help small businesses by purchasing from them, and this is usually anywhere between $10,000 to $250,000. And they also have multiple grant applications open at any given time, and specifically right now, there's 2 for solar, which our project is currently applicable for that we could apply for. The first one is the American-Made Solar Prize, which is $4 million, and this is designed to help innovation in U.S. solar hardware and software technologies. And then there's also the Community Power Accelerator Prize, which has a total value budget of $10 million, but individual prizes are between $50,000 to $200,000. And these help new emerging solar developers to help achieve goals of solar-powered energy production across the U.S. And then there's lots of other funding opportunities for projects like ours through the EPA, NSF, and National Geographic. So overall, there's lots of opportunities for us to get the money that we need for this project. So for reaching our prospective customers and beneficiaries, our main method is through marketing. So this would start in Rochester, of course, and then as we continue to hopefully expand this, we could also expand that marketing throughout the northern US with the goal of eventually expanding throughout the northern US, maybe into Canada, basically anywhere where our product would benefit, places with cold climates and high heating costs. And then we could also rely on tax incentives for our customers to want to buy our product by eventually encouraging the government to establish these tax incentives or rebates for our customers because our product provides such benefits for the electrical grid and the environment.
So finally, here's our sustainability complex. As we've mentioned, this would occur on the regional level, which would mainly stabilize the base load for the energy market in that region, which would also trickle down and impact the household, individual and community levels. So like I said before, energy and cost savings and resilience in case of grid malfunction. And moving up, as we would hope to scale up in the future, we could move to the more national and state and then eventually global level if we focused mainly on our target areas that need that have high heating costs. So a lot of places that experience cold, and then also places that experience storms, and especially like winter storm, ice, like snowy conditions, because this again would offer the grid resiliency. So as we would scale up, we would focus on national and global places such as northern US, Canada, and eventually northern Europe. And we could research more where that would be applicable in the future. So that is our presentation. Thank you. We have our sources, and yeah, very open to questions. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was sourcing the sand for the batteries.
There's a lot of debate about sand prices. There's a lot of news about sand shortages. There's different deals with using sand for construction or not. There's manufactured sand and then there's river sand. But basically, we can use any sand we want. Like, there's no need for any high quality sand at all. We can just buy whatever medium we need to store the heat. It doesn't really affect the efficiency that much, depending on what type of sand. But we haven't really looked that far in depth of where we would buy the sand from directly. We just know that it doesn't really matter that much. We just need a large volume.
And yeah, like he said, we haven't looked a ton into where we would source the sand from, but just piggybacking off of that with the low quality sand, a lot of the times there might be leftovers from projects, things get renovated, bulldozed over, they might just not use it. There are many ways we could source from, but we haven't really gone super into depth with that yet.
Yeah, but like Neil said, there are definitely sustainable options. We could even set up a system to purposely and mindfully collect sand from projects that are not using the rest of theirs and so on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the question was, have we considered maybe partnering with local landfills or construction sites and places that use a lot of sand for construction? And a comment was made that we would have to think about pollutants. And yeah, I think that's very true. I think thinking about what is in the sand may or may not impact the storage process. So we would obviously have to have non-contaminated sand and soil, but that's a good point. It could be an area of research and development to figure out like at what point sand could or couldn't be used.
I was also just going to add on to that with thinking about the pollutants. Obviously, this is a really good point that we hadn't thought about, but definitely we could look into also methods of potentially removing those pollutants from the sand if there is an issue with that.
Yeah, what we would have to do is pre-vet the sand before we fill our units, because if we heat it up to 600 degrees Celsius, and there's something that can off gas in there, it's gonna blow up. It's gonna not be great for whoever's around it. So it's definitely important to make sure we have clean sand.
So from the diagram that you have, really good look at like kind of what it would look like. It looked like your storage battery was buried underground. Yes.
Yeah.
So is there any like soil type that's optimal or soil type that you couldn't have that wouldn't be beneficial for you?
Right. So the question was, is our system underground, and if there's any other like soil considerations we have to consider before putting it underground. So with this system, it could be put underground or it could be put above ground. That's the whole beauty of the shipping container. We can kind of put it wherever there's space, and if there isn't space, and we could dig and put it underground. With the insulation that we're already going to put on it, I don't think that the soil would affect it. The soil is how difficult it is to dig. Is it worth digging to put this in?
Yeah, so the question was basically if we would conduct like an environmental assessment according to like where we were going to source the sand, right? Yeah, and I think that's totally a good call. I think our goal with trying to aim to be as sustainable as possible in creating this alternate storage is to be most sustainable. So we could set goals around where we source all of our products and aim to be in the ballpark of what would be most sustainable, but also most feasible and affordable. So I think meeting like a happy medium in those three categories would help us to meet our goals. But yeah, sustainability is definitely top of mind. So that's a really good point. Yeah, Imani. Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I was also just gonna say, I know we already said like we haven't looked super in depth about where exactly we're sourcing like what % of our products from, but we most likely would be trying our best to source most of it from somewhere that had already used it, doesn't need it anymore, like you said, like empty lots, construction sites, things like that. So hopefully we would be sourcing as little as possible from just directly from beaches or other environments. But yeah, if we were to do that, we would definitely have to consider where it's coming from and the risk of that area.
And a short thing related to that is the beauty of it is that it can be recycled again after we use the sand. It doesn't get chemically changed at all. So any materials that we're using can be recycled well.
I'm not sure if you guys mentioned scale yet. I mean, kind of with the sustainability complex, but have you considered like smaller units, kind of like the picture where like an individual household could buy your
That's a good question. So we did start out with our idea. Oh, sorry. The question is, have we considered scale and if an individual home or residence could buy a unit of ours? That's a great question. So we did start out with considering just one building. Is it worth using like one unit for that? We definitely have different sizes. Like for general storage containers, there's a 20-foot version and a 40-foot version, and that really changes how much volume we have of sand. So that changes how much heat we can store. But generally, for these sizes of units, it would be more useful for many homes at a time than one home. But we could definitely look into research for one specific residence. But it's usually used for district heating for a lot of homes at one time, because in order to heat the sand up to that height, that temperature, it'd be better to just heat a lot of homes at once. Money?
I just had a basic question about like safety measures. Like, let's say you're trying to convince like a resident who has one of these under their homes. What type of what can you tell them to kind of put them at ease? Like, oh, yeah, your sand is being heated up to like 600 degrees at your house, but you're fine. Like, if someone's a little bit skeptical about it, how can you convince them that it is a safe, renewable energy source?
That is a good question. The question was, how would you educate and communicate to the residents that it's safe and safety measures about heating up sand to that level?
So with sand, because you're heating it up, it's not going to expand at all. So I would compare it to a water heater. If water heater runs away, it can build up a ridiculous amount of pressure and blow. So our system is actually safer than a water heater system, because if the sand is vetted, like we said earlier, there shouldn't be any risk of explosion or off-gassing.
I'll keep it short. Given your plan for expansion, how are you going to consider the natural disasters that occur, especially just as the climate continues to change? How do you plan on combating that?
I think one thing is that basically, how do we plan on combating different natural disasters as the climate continues to change? So I think what comes to mind initially is that our system is pretty contained, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not very threatened by many natural disasters is the general basis. I think it does have every aspect, or some of the aspects of other types of energy, like the ways that this energy would be entering the homes of the people. But it's nothing that isn't already very researched and developed for energy companies that already exist. So we would probably work off of what companies know, and also kind of aim to be at the forefront of resiliency. But there's nothing about the actual storage container that would make it extra vulnerable to any type of storm or disaster.
I also want to add just onto that as well. Like we mentioned earlier, this diagram shows the battery underground, but really it has a lot of versatility. So depending on like a specific area's natural hazards, for example, like hurricanes or thunderstorms, that kind of thing, we could change the design or where it's placed so that it's either in a safer location or somehow like protected against that kind of thing. So that would definitely be like a case by case kind of scenario. But I think the versatility of the design and like the simplicity of it really lends itself to kind of combating those natural hazards.
Thank you guys very much for the amazing presentation. And last, but not least, is a small module reactor.
Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about small modular reactors. I'm Margaret. I'm studying mechanical engineering at the University of Illinois.
I'm Megan. I'm studying civil engineering at Vanderbilt University.
I'm Lucy. I'm studying aerospace engineering at Penn State.
Riley. I'm studying environmental engineering at North Carolina State.
And I'm Mona, and I'm studying international sustainable development and climate change at Antioch University.
All right, so we are focusing really on making huge changes with very small amounts of power. So first to start with, nuclear energy. What is it? So basically, as you can see from our GIF here, it's basically a neutron collides with an atom, which then explodes. That energy is released into the area, and more neutrons are also released to create a chain reaction. And this, what is called fission, releases energy that heats water, which forms steam. Steams turn the turbines, and the turbines drive generators to create energy that can be used in our power systems. So as you can tell from this, nuclear is a very clean, carbon-free energy. And it also has a huge capacity factor. I think it's like 93% in the United States, which is great for the amount of energy that we need with the electrification of all of the systems that we're using. So then what are modular reactors? So there are small modular reactors and micro reactors, which have different energy powers. So usually microreactors are going to be used for very small reasons like research, but small modular reactors can power larger systems. They are easily transportable, as most of them are built prior to being placed on the site, and also they are very small. The microreactors are about the size of an 18-wheeler truck. And these modular reactors will provide reliable, efficient, and carbon-free energy for any area that we want to place them in, and specifically areas that might be hard to reach with a general power grid system. The modular reactors are also completely self-adjustable. They regulate themselves, so meltdown will not occur, and improved technologies, because these modular reactors are part of a new generation. Like, these are really, really safe, and because of this sort of change in how nuclear is done, we want to provide education to people and change the policy surrounding these systems to increase their use. And so to talk more about that is Megan.
So first I'm going to go over the golden circle, and which is basically the reason behind our overall purpose. Firstly, our why is that nuclear SMRs would provide reliable, efficient, safe, and easily transportable source of carbon-free energy, and this is necessary to reach decarbonization goals. For our how, we would aim to create a 501c3 nonprofit to advocate for government policy changes and marketing campaigns to support SMRs. And additionally, we would provide educational outreach programs about nuclear power. Essentially, since there are companies working on developing these systems already, we would work on fighting the roadblocks that are preventing them from actually being implemented. And then for our what, our eventual goal is the implementation of SMR policy changes that must precede their installation, and changing societal perceptions of nuclear energy through marketing campaigns and community outreach and education. To get into our social business model canvas, we have a few key resources. The first would be our organizational staff. So this would include employees who work on things like administrative duties, grant writing for funding, and policy advocacy. Next, we would have our volunteer corps, who would really be involved in a lot of that educational outreach with schools that I was talking about earlier. And then lastly is our key partnerships with other organizations. And to get into our key activities, so the first and probably most important one is our policy advocacy. And this is advocating for increased funding for SMR development and also policies that are more favorable for it, which we'll talk about more in later slides. Additionally, we would hope to create government marketing campaigns through the U.S. Ad Council, and that would be a big thing we'd be advocating for, basically to inform the public about SMRs and about the importance and the safety of nuclear energy. And then the other part of our nonprofit would be community education initiatives. So this would basically be lessons and outreach in STEM schools talking about nuclear, as well as seminars and Q&A sessions in areas that we're targeting to build these SMRs. So for our partners and key stakeholders, a major one would be regulatory and government agencies, which includes the U.S. Department of Energy, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the U.S. Ad Council, which I mentioned before, and then just politicians and policymakers in general. Other key stakeholders include emergency and disaster relief groups, energy utilities, SMR research, development, and production companies, and environmental advocacy groups. And then lastly, key stakeholders include the local communities and students, and one example of this would be through the California Bright Schools program, which is a program that helps schools increase their energy efficiency.
So the value that we're proposing with this business is sustainability in renewable energy sources across the country, because nuclear, and specifically immediate nuclear that we can implement as soon as possible, is necessary to reach the goals we have for lowering carbon emissions. And with that, we hope to increase education and exposure to this technology and enable more equal access to energy, starting on a small scale across states and then across countries. And to our customers, we're providing a route to enable more efficient, both in terms of cost and energy production, and extreme safety, even in comparison to other forms of renewable energy that might sound not as scary as nuclear. And to measure this impact, we're going to account for changes in the government policy that come from this advocacy. And we will increase the education around nuclear energy as a renewable energy source. And we'll monitor what SMRs and MMRs are actually implemented across the country. And to accomplish this, we have several policy changes that we're hoping to focus on. And on the technical side, we'd like to unify the policies that cover the regulations around nuclear. Currently, there's a lot of red tape, as I'm sure you can imagine, regarding nuclear processes. And a lot of it, it's very helpful to standardize that and make it more cohesive so it's understandable and implementable. And to make that happen, we need political support for modular reactors and most definitely government funding for industry and regulatory groups. And additionally, we'll be doing outreach and education and awareness, which I will talk about on the next slide. So our channels to make this possible, one is commercials, and we think that this should focus on the communities that are actually impacted by this technology, which would most likely be underserved communities that most directly see the effects of climate change. Additionally, we'll be doing virtual and in-person demos that show people how the technology works and decrease fear surrounding nuclear energy. And we will also be reaching out to youth programs to educate children and spread awareness and interest around nuclear energy. And most importantly, we will relate climate change and what's happening in our world to modular reactors and emphasize why they're so important and how we can implement them to see a difference.
And yeah, some of the groups we're aiming to benefit include cities, specifically ones that are kind of hard to reach. So think of California. A lot of their cities are surrounded by mountains. And so our goal would be to use the transport aspect of our SMRs to bring cities power there. Groups who regularly travel and need a quick setup and breakdown. So the military going overseas, their camps, they need to be able to set it up and break it down really quick. So our goal would be to provide them cleaner energy. Areas affected by disasters, so after hurricanes or earthquakes, provide residents there some power. And then also countries needing commercial vessels for trade and to navigate the colder oceans. Most submarines already use nuclear power, and so our goal would be to implement this into shipping ships as well. And some of our customers would be emergency and disaster relief crews, and so Red Cross is a huge one. Governments of third world countries and also governments of countries providing aid to others. And this would be after post-war and post-disaster. Then also utility companies. And what's great about SMRs is energy types like solar and wind. If it were to be cloudy days or non-windy, you can actually use SMRs as a backup system to these other types of energy just to provide backup in case anything were to go wrong. Cost structure, we have salaries for staff, so this would include directors, volunteer coordinators, administrators, facilities, so the storage, that would be around $25,000, and overhead, we expect around a 9% overhead. And so in total, this would be around $435,000 annually. For revenue, we're hoping to get funding from both the government and grant funding as well as donations. And we are a nonprofit, and so really we just put our money back into researching SMRs some more. And we're hoping, again, in the change in perception. A lot of the times when you hear nuclear, you think of war, you think of bombings. And so our goal is to educate crews and students as well to further the idea and opinion of nuclear power.
So in terms of sustainability development goals, looking at it, really it touched on 9 different ones. I won't go through all 9 of them, but really highlighting some, looking at affordable and clean energy. Nuclear is definitely one of the most cleanest energies we can use. And as we continue to get that policy advocacy, it becomes more and more affordable. Innovation and infrastructure, it is one of the newer infrastructure and innovations in nuclear. And so bringing that in. The reduced inequities, really looking at, this is something we could use in disadvantaged communities. This is something we could use in rural communities. Sustainable cities, really looking at, because it's a smaller production, the smaller cities have more of a voice in terms of how they want to power their community, as opposed to based on like larger nuclear facilities or for larger regional areas, and some of the smaller cities and communities don't really have a voice in that. And then lastly, everything, right, really goes into what are those climate change goals that we have. And for that, looking at our sustainability complex, how does that tie in? And it really ties in kind of starting at the top, where globally we have that, the sustainable development goals and those 9 that I just mentioned. But nationwide and in terms of states, the regions, the cities all tend to have climate action goals, right? So I know California's net zero by 2035, so really getting to tie into those goals. And then most importantly, I think kind of at that household individual level, it's that more affordable, cleaner, safer, reliable energy. Riley touched on it a little bit, right? But for that reliability, as we lose solar and wind, right, as either the wind goes down or the sun goes down and we don't have enough battery storage for that, we have that peak time of about 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. That is the most power consumption. And so in some of the larger states, we have rolling blackouts where we can't provide enough energy. So during the day, we're overproducing on solar and wind, and so selling that back to other states. But then 4 o'clock hits, and then the state does not have the reliable grid. So really using it as targeted as necessary to help us maintain that stable grid. And for that really helps out the affordability of the individual household. So with that, Are there any questions? Yes.
I'm curious, like, I think you kind of touched on it, but what do you think, like, originated that fear? Or where does that kind of, like, start? Because I feel like we all feel it, but we don't really know where that fear comes from. And
Yeah.
in line with that, have you thought of, like, any, like, key messages, or, like, do you know of any key messages that have worked, especially for, like, you guys who are, like, sold on it,
Mm-hmm.
that you think could work?
Yeah, so the question was, what kind of originated that fear of nuclear and why kind of everybody has that stigma about it? And then if there's any key messaging, and I'll start, and if anybody wants else to join in. I don't know, has anybody seen Oppenheimer? Yeah, that's where it started, right? I mean, it was, it really was seeing the visual of a mushroom cloud, right? And how many movies have shown the visual of a mushroom cloud and then like skin melting and right, all that kind of stuff. So I think, Hollywood certainly has really leaned hard into that perception, and I think that I don't remember if it was Megan who mentioned it, right? That energy, or maybe it was Maggie, energy, like nuclear energy has changed, right? So this isn't the old nuclear that everybody was talking about. So in terms of messaging, like we've created the small power big change hashtag, and it really is going to be about going into, it's just like they've changed perceptions about other things, right? Eggs used to be bad, now eggs are good, and right. So I think it's going to be following some of that same model. And that's why we would bring in the U.S. Ad Council, because that's the government's kind of marketing arm that helps with those bigger campaigns. Anybody else? Yep. Oh, go down the road.
Okay, I was just gonna say, like, the technology has changed a lot, and I definitely wasn't always sold on nuclear. And I recently attended a seminar about nuclear energy that a co-student of mine presented, and she talked very much in detail about the different technologies with the fuel. There are new fuel types. There's different systems in place, both electrically and physically, to prevent meltdown if it were to occur. And obviously, there's always going to be extra systems that we don't really think about, like, what if this occurs, but we really have tried to tackle all of those. Well, if this occurs, like, then we have a system in place that will stop this from meltdown. And also, like, these modular reactors, a lot of them go underground, so inherently that's safer because you're already containing things under the earth. They can't spread as well through the atmosphere. So I think, like, the biggest thing is really educating people on a non-technical and a technical level about, like, how does this work? That way people are like, oh, I understand this now, and this helps me feel safe about the energy that I'm using.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Maggie said, but also just like in terms of what sold me on nuclear energy in general, I worked for a power company the past 2 summers, and they do with the interns a lot of like seminars about their energy production, and just seeing a graph of like how much of different sources make up the energy. I kind of realized like it's great to talk about solar and wind and batteries, but right now even companies that are some of the biggest producers of wind and solar make up so much more of their generation from backup fuels such as natural gas and nuclear. I know where I'm from in North Carolina, nuclear actually makes up around 30% of electricity generation, and so like it's not just this cool idea, it's something that's necessary for the energy transition, and like we cannot transition to totally carbon-free energy without it. And I feel like that's something a lot of people don't know. So I would say for me, that's why I'm really interested in it.
I don't mean to over answer the question, so I'll be really quick. But I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is where 3 Mile Island is, which was like a huge nuclear disaster in the 90s. And so in elementary school, it was like they would make us do drills like a tornado warning. They're like, hey, here's what you need to do if something like 3 Mile Island ever happens again. And I was terrified, and I had no idea what nuclear was or anything about how it worked. But now that I've like gone through school and I've been interested in STEM, like being educated and understanding how it works is super cool to me, and to like understand the safety of it is really important.
Yeah, so the question was, does this nuclear use radioactive material, and what do we do to dispose of it? And to answer that question is yes, we still have to use uranium mostly. It's very radioactive material. However, going back to what I was talking about with the fuel cells, so there's this new technology for fuel cells which everything is coated in ceramic, and that ceramic doesn't decay until the radioactive property of the material has gone below the threshold of it being dangerous to life around it. So that's something that was huge when it was first discovered, of like, oh, how we can do this. And so this fuel becoming more ingrained into the system is very helpful. And even if that ceramic coating does decay quicker than it says it will, then the US government will take that toxic waste and dispose of it for you. So very good solution to that.
So a lot of the larger scale nuclear reactors that we have now, they are part of a generation, the third generation. And these SMRs are actually a part of a fourth generation. And it uses a slightly different type of uranium that's a little bit more abundant. But with these small reactors, it actually increases the lifetime of these cells before they need to be replaced from about 2 years, I believe now, for the large reactors to around 25 years now. And so while there is still waste that will be produced, this will give us more time and more of our efforts can be put towards coming up with solutions for the storage instead of overloading our systems as quickly as we are now. And so it would just give us a little bit more time to come up with better solutions than the ones we have now.
Also, to give you like a quick rundown of the size of this fuel cell is about this big. So this toxic waste is very small, and in comparison to the amount of toxic batteries that we're producing from electric vehicles, like it's really tiny.
So you guys talked about a lot of great locations and circumstances where SMRs can be used. Are there any places and locations that it absolutely cannot be used? Or is it kind of being universally applicable?
So the question was, we had examples of where it can be used. Are there any examples of where it cannot or should not be used? Right now, no, but I think like the questions we had earlier with the last presentations of the containers in the sand and those types of things, I think placement of it will be community specific, right? So in California, I don't know that we want to bury things because we like to shake and burn. So right there. So I think that the placement of them, and because they are so transportable, really will depend on the community, and then also the use type. So if we're using it for a disaster, right, it'll be on a shipping container, it'll be on a vehicle, right? So depending on how and where they're being used will be how they're placed.
Another great thing about these is they can be buried, and there they are a lot more protected. But one thing that can happen with that, they're a lot more likely to be flooded. And so if we were to use these SMRs in places where there is high flooding, burying it would not be the best option. And so there, that would be more where we keep it above ground, or as she was saying, like in shipping containers, just where it can't get messed up by the flooding itself. So keep it for that. Thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes the Capstone projects. So thank you all very, very much for all of the really good projects. And I hope that you guys have learned a lot about yourselves and sustainability and like what you guys can do, because at the beginning of this program, you guys had like absolutely nothing and you made a whole like business out of it. So I hope this inspires you to move forward with entrepreneurship and like taking these kinds of things that you've learned here with us, because you guys are the future and you guys will definitely make a difference going forward. So thank you so much for the presentations, and congratulations on completing the green program.